That's impossible. The scream reverberated through the sterile corridors of the alien laboratory, a chilling blend of disbelief and terror. The room was bathed in a sickly green glow, the hum of advanced machinery pulsating in sync with the gasps of the remaining researchers. They stared at the impossible, a girl, human, no older than 16, whose lifeless body had been reduced to ash less than an hour ago, now stood in the containment chamber. Her eyes were cold, almost luminescent, and her posture was unnervingly still. Blood smeared her pale skin like war paint. But the wounds from her brutal demise were gone, replaced by smooth, unbroken flesh. She stared at them with an intensity that suggested she wasn't quite human anymore. Before diving deeper into this extraordinary tale, make sure to subscribe, like this story if it's already giving you chills, and comment your theories below. You won't want to miss what's coming next. The aliens, geneticists of the Resonant Collective, prided themselves on being the galaxy's foremost experts in biological manipulation. They had captured her as part of an experiment to test the resilience of human physiology. The tests had been cruel, scorching lasers, toxic chemicals, a deliberate, methodical dismantling of her body to understand its limits. Her death had been slow, agonizing, and absolute. They had celebrated the data they extracted from her. But this resurrection was an anomaly they couldn't comprehend. Lead researcher Klex Thursday's tentacles quivered with unease. "Run diagnostics. Now," he barked, his voice clicking with desperation. Assistants scrambled to their consoles, pressing illuminated glyphs on their floating panels, but the screens glitched, displaying static or symbols they couldn't decipher. Inside the chamber, the girl took a step forward. The motion triggered alarms, and containment fields shimmered to life, trapping her within an energy matrix designed to hold creatures far stronger than a human. Yet she smiled, a slow, haunting curl of her lips that seemed to mock their technology. "You should have left me dead," she said, her voice soft but laden with menace. The room descended into chaos. Klex Thursday barked orders to strengthen the containment field, but the energy flickered. It dimmed, surged, and then collapsed entirely. Silence. A silence that made the resonant researchers wish for the cacophony of alarms. Then she moved. It was not a human motion, not entirely. There was a fluidity to it, an otherworldly precision. She was at the glass in an instant, her palm pressed flat against it. Cracks spiderwebbed across the surface, as if responding to her mere presence. The researchers froze, the weight of her stare pinning them in place. "You wanted to understand what humans are capable of," she said, her tone calm but cutting. "Let me show you." The glass shattered. In the chaos that followed, Klex Thursday barely managed to escape the chamber, sealing the bulkhead behind him. He could hear the screams of his colleagues, short, sharp bursts that ended far too quickly. The girl wasn't just retaliating. She was hunting. Her footsteps echoed, slow and deliberate, as if she relished the terror she was inspiring. Klex Thursday activated his communicator, his tentacles fumbling. "Send reinforcements to Lab Alpha 7. Emergency Protocol Harnox Delta." The response was static. Outside the lab, a massive storm raged across the alien planet, lightning casting jagged shadows against the walls. Wind howled through the corridors as if nature itself was rebelling against the atrocities committed within. But even as Klex Thursday fled deeper into the facility, a growing dread settled in his chest. The girl wasn't just killing. She was changing. Surveillance feeds caught glimpses of her, her movements becoming less human, her body shimmering with an otherworldly energy that pulsed like a heartbeat. She was absorbing something from the facility, from the researchers she touched. Knowledge, power. The Resnith had prided themselves on their domination of lesser species, their belief in their superiority. But now, faced with this resurrected human, Klex Thursday realized their hubris had doomed them. As the lights in the corridor began to flicker, he could hear her voice again, soft and echoing through the comm system. 37 minutes was all I needed. Now, it's your turn to understand. The bulkhead rattled. The reinforced alloy groaning under the force pressing against it. Klex Thursday stumbled backward, his tentacles quivering in panic. The others hadn't lasted long, minutes, perhaps seconds, and now it was just him, alone, trapped, and the human girl, or whatever she had become, was coming. He activated every security measure he could think of, his claws scrambling over the control panel embedded in the wall. Plasma turrets deployed from the ceiling, whirring to life, their glowing barrels humming with lethal energy. The bulkhead's locking mechanism engaged with a deafening clang, layers of energy fields shimmering to reinforce the door. For a moment, silence reigned. Then, a single knock. It wasn't a frantic pounding or an enraged attack, just a soft, deliberate knock. Klex Thursday froze, every nerve in his body screaming to run, but there was nowhere left to go. The facility was a labyrinth of laboratories and sealed chambers, and she had already cut through his colleagues like vapor. "You can't stop me," came her voice, smooth and calm, with a faint echo that made it sound like it was everywhere at once. Klex Thursday stared at the bulkhead, as if willing it to hold. What are you?" he rasped, his voice trembling. The knock came again, followed by a pause, and then laughter, soft lilting, human but wrong. "You're the scientist," she replied. "You tell me." A loud crack split the air as the bulkhead began to warp. The plasma turrets swiveled, locking onto the growing fissure in the metal. They opened fire, the room erupting in a cascade of searing light and deafening noise. The air smelled of ozone and burnt metal as energy beams collided with the reinforced door. For a moment, Klex Thursday dared to hope. But then, the energy ceased. The turrets powered down, their barrels glowing red-hot as sparks danced across their surfaces. A voice crackled through the facility's intercom system, chilling in its familiarity. "Your toys are impressive," she said, "but they won't save you." The bulkhead exploded inward, shards of metal propelled like shrapnel. Klex Thursday shielded his face as debris ricocheted around the room. When he lowered his tentacles, she was standing there, illuminated by the flickering remains of the overhead lights. Her eyes glowed now, bright, unnatural, and searing like twin suns. Her body radiated an aura of energy that distorted the air around her, making it shimmer and warp. She stepped over the molten remains of the bulkhead, unbothered by the heat. Klex Thursday backed away, his claws clicking against the floor. We didn't mean to." "To what?" she interrupted, her tone icy. "Torture me? Kill me? Study me like some primitive specimen?" She tilted her head, and the faintest hint of a smile played on her lips. "You're lying." The aura around her flared, and Klex Thursday's exoskeleton vibrated under the pressure. He could feel her presence, an overwhelming weight that pressed down on him like a tidal wave. She wasn't just angry. She was something more, something beyond anything the Resonant had encountered. "You took everything from me," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You ought to know what humans are capable of when pushed to their limits. Let me show you." She raised her hand, and the energy surrounding her condensed into a sphere of blinding light. Klex Thursday braced himself, expecting a killing blow, but instead, she turned and directed the energy into the console on the wall. The facility shuddered violently. Alarms blared as emergency lights bathed the room in crimson. Overhead, the intercom crackled with frantic warnings. "System breach detected. Containment fields offline. Power grid destabilizing." Klex Thursday gaped at her, his fear momentarily eclipsed by confusion. "What are you doing?" "Ending this," she replied, her voice flat. The energy rippled through the facility, spreading like wildfire. Consoles exploded, sparks cascading like showers of stars. Doors unlocked, chambers opened, and containment fields dissolved. Creatures from countless worlds, specimens the Resonant had captured and experimented on, were suddenly free. Their roars and screams echoed through the halls, a cacophony of rage and liberation. Klex Thursday watched in horror as a massive, serpentine beast slithered past the doorway, its glowing fangs dripping with venom. It ignored him, focused instead on the chaos beyond. The girl turned to follow it, her footsteps eerily calm amidst the bedlam. "Wait!" Klex Thursday called after her, his voice cracking. "If you destroy the facility, you'll die too." She paused in the doorway, glancing back at him with an expression that chilled him to his core. "I already did." And then she was gone, swallowed by the storm of fire and screams that consumed the facility. Klex Thursday slumped to the floor, his body trembling. He had thought himself untouchable, part of a species destined to rule. But in that moment, he realized the truth. The Reznov weren't gods. They were nothing more than children playing with forces they couldn't begin to understand, and they had unleashed something they could never contain. Klex Thursday stumbled through the rubble-strewn corridors, his vision blurred by smoke and flashing lights. The facility groaned around him, its once impenetrable walls reduced to fractured metal and sparking conduits. Creatures tore through the halls, some crashing through walls with primal rage, others skittering silently in the shadows, their glowing eyes promising violence. He wasn't running towards safety. There was none to be found. He was running on instinct, driven by a primal need to survive, though deep down, he knew it was futile. The human girl wasn't just destroying the facility. She was erasing it, wiping away every trace of the Reznov's dominance. He rounded a corner, narrowly dodging the swipe of a clawed appendage as a quadrupedal beast lunged past him. Its roar was deafening, shaking loose dust and debris from the ceiling. Klex Thursday pressed himself against the wall, his breath hitching as the creature disappeared into the smoke. The intercom crackled overhead, the automated voice struggling to maintain coherence. Structural integrity compromised. Total collapse imminent. Evacuate immediately. Evacuation. The word sparked a sliver of hope. If he could reach the docking bay, he could escape. Leave this cursed place behind and warn the collective of what they had unleashed. But as he sprinted down the corridor, a terrifying thought gripped him. What if she followed? What if she found a way to escape too? The air grew hotter as flames consumed the facility, the acrid stench of burning machinery and flesh clogging his senses. Klex Thursday's vision swam, but he forced himself forward. He had to make it. He had to. The corridor ahead of him exploded in a blinding flash, and he was thrown backward, slamming into the wall. Pain seared through his exoskeleton as he crumpled to the ground, his tentacles twitching weakly. Through the haze of smoke, he saw her. She stood amidst the flames, her silhouette backlit by the roaring inferno. Her eyes burned like molten stars, and the energy surrounding her pulsed with a rhythm that seemed to shake the air itself. She wasn't running. She wasn't in a hurry. She was in control, and she knew it. Klex Thursday tried to speak, but his voice was a ragged whisper. Why are you doing this?" She stepped closer, her bare feet leaving scorch marks on the floor. "You still don't understand," she said, her voice calm but laced with something darker. "You think this is about revenge, about me, but it's not." He struggled to rise, his limbs trembling under his weight. "Then what is it?" Her expression softened, just for a moment, and for the first time, he saw something almost human in her eyes. "It's about balance," she said. "You take, you destroy, you manipulate, but nothing exists in a vacuum. Everything has a cost." The flames behind her flared, casting her in an otherworldly glow. "You took everything from me," she continued. "My life, my body, my humanity. But in doing so, you gave me something else. Something you can't control. And now, it's your turn to lose." Klex Thursday's gaze darted to the side, searching for any means of escape. His claws brushed against the hilt of a plasma blade strapped to his belt. Slowly, carefully, he drew it, the weapon humming to life in his trembling grasp. She noticed. Of course, she did. Her eyes flicked to the blade, and a faint smile tugged at her lips. "Do you really think that will help you?" Desperation surged within him, overriding his fear. With a guttural cry, he lunged forward, swinging the blade with all the strength he could muster. The energy crackled as it sliced through the air, aiming for her neck. But she didn't move. The blade stopped inches from her skin, frozen in midair. Klex Thursday stared in disbelief as the energy flickered and died, the weapon falling from his grasp. An unseen force gripped him, lifting him off the ground and pinning him against the wall. "You don't learn, do you?" she said, tilting her head. Her voice was almost pitying, but her eyes betrayed no mercy. The pressure increased, and Klex Thursday's exoskeleton cracked, sending waves of pain through his body. He clawed at the invisible force holding him, his tentacles writhing in agony. "Please," he gasped. We were wrong. We didn't understand." Her gaze bore into him, unrelenting. "No," she said softly. "You didn't." The energy surrounding her flared once more, and Klex Thursday felt a searing heat envelop him. His vision blurred, and for a moment, he thought it was over. But then the pressure released, and he crumpled to the ground, gasping for air. When he looked up, she was gone. The flames roared louder, the facility shuddering with the force of its impending collapse. Klex Thursday dragged himself forward, his body screaming in protest. He didn't know why she had spared him, but he wasn't going to waste a chance. As he crawled through the wreckage, a single thought consumed him. If the collective learned of this, they would stop at nothing to destroy her. But what if they couldn't? What if nothing could? The docking bay was in chaos. Fires raged across the hangar floor, reflecting off the sleek hulls of alien vessels, most of them now twisted and broken beyond recognition. The acrid tang of burning fuel stung the air, and the howls of released creatures echoed from every corner. Klex Thursday staggered through the wreckage, his limbs faltering with every step. Survival was all that mattered now. The collective needed to know. But even as he limped toward the nearest intact ship, dread gnawed at him. He had seen what she could do, how effortlessly she had torn through their defenses. No containment field, no weapon, no strategy could stop her. He activated the ship's access panel with shaking claws, praying the system hadn't been compromised. The door hissed open, and he stumbled inside, collapsing onto the control console. The ship powered up with a low hum, its lights flickering to life. Behind him, the docking bay door groaned. Klex Thursday froze. Slowly, he turned his head, his breath catching in his throat. She was there, standing amidst the carnage, her figure bathed in an eerie glow. The flames licked at her feet but didn't touch her, as though the inferno itself dared not defy her. Her expression was unreadable, her glowing eyes fixed on him. "You think running will save you?" she asked, her voice calm, almost gentle. Klex Thursday swallowed hard, his claws trembling over the controls. "You don't understand," he stammered. "If you leave me alive, if I can warn them, they'll come for you. They'll send armies, fleets." She stepped forward, the ship's ramp quaking under her presence. "Good," she said. "Let them come." Her words chilled him to his core. She wasn't afraid of the collective. If anything, she welcomed the idea of their retaliation. It wasn't defiance. It was certainty. "You'll doom us all," he whispered. She paused, tilting her head as if considering his words. "You've already doomed yourselves," she replied. "I'm just here to finish what you started." The energy around her pulsed, and Klex Thursday's vision blurred as the pressure in the air mounted. He clenched his claws, panic overtaking him. If he was going to die, he wouldn't go down begging. With a roar, he slammed his claws onto the control panel, initiating the ship's engines. The vessel trembled as it began to rise, the docking bay's force field flickering to reveal the void of space beyond. Her expression didn't change. Klex Thursday's mandibles clicked nervously as he barked commands into the console, the ship lurching forward. "You'll regret this," he growled, his desperation giving way to anger. "The collective will find you. They'll destroy you." She smiled, a small, faint curve of her lips that sent a shiver down his spine. "Let them try." And then she disappeared. Not through the door, not with a flash or a sound. She simply wasn't there anymore, as though she had never been. The pressure in the air lifted, but the weight in Klex Thursday's chest remained. The ship cleared the force field, breaking into the void of space. Klex Thursday slumped at his seat, his limbs trembling with exhaustion. He had escaped barely, but the feeling of victory was fleeting, overshadowed by the knowledge of what he was leaving behind. The facility below him was a glowing inferno, its structure collapsing inward as explosions rippled through its core. The energy she had unleashed was spreading, tearing through the planet's crust like an unstoppable force. The ground cracked and buckled, magma surging to the surface as the atmosphere filled with ash and fire. Klex Thursday stared in horror. She wasn't just destroying the facility, she was annihilating the entire planet. The comm system crackled to life, jolting him from his thoughts. Static filled the cockpit, followed by a voice that made his blood freeze. "Running won't change anything, Klex Thursday," she said. "You can't outrun me. None of you can." His claws gripped the controls, his mandibles chattering with fear. What are you?" Her laughter echoed through the cockpit, cold and haunting. "I told you already," she said. "I'm what you made me." The comm went silent, leaving him alone with the hum of the ship's engines and the sight of the planet's destruction below. He leaned back in his seat, his mind racing. The collective needed to know. They needed to prepare. But even as he plotted his course, a nagging thought lingered in the back of his mind. If she could destroy an entire planet with nothing but her will, what hope did the collective have? And what would she do when there was nothing left to destroy? The void of space stretched endlessly before him, but Klex Thursday's thoughts were anything but empty. His claws moved over the ship's navigation panel with practiced speed, setting a course for the nearest collective outpost. His mind, however, remained trapped in the burning remnants of the facility and the girl's glowing eyes. She had let him go. Why? Was it arrogance? Or something worse? Some deeper plan he couldn't begin to comprehend? The way she spoke, the way she acted, it was as though the destruction she wrought wasn't the end game, but merely the beginning. As the ship's engines roared to life, Klex Thursday activated the comm system. "Priority transmission to collective command," he rasped, his voice trembling. "This is Overseer Klex Thursday of Station Prime Theta. We've encountered a Class Omega threat. I need immediate rendezvous with the High Council." The system buzzed in response, and the cold, mechanical voice of a collective operator filled the cockpit. "Transmission acknowledged. High Council summons initiated. Estimated arrival. For cycles, Klex Thursday muttered, his mandibles clicking in frustration. Too slow. She could destroy 100 planets in that time, but there was no other option. The Council had to understand what they were facing. As the ship entered hyperspace, the overwhelming silence of the cockpit pressed in around him. He slumped back in his seat, exhaustion threatening to pull him under. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw her. He saw the fire, the energy, the sheer power that had torn apart everything he had built. He didn't sleep. The ship jolted as it exited hyperspace, the sprawling metropolis of the collective's core world looming ahead. Towering spires of glimmering metal reached toward the stars, their surfaces reflecting the light of a nearby binary sun. The planet was a testament to the collective's dominance, a shining beacon of their technological prowess and unity. Klex Thursday's claws trembled as he piloted the ship toward the docking port. How could he explain what he had seen? How could he make them understand the magnitude of the threat? The docking clamps engaged with a mechanical hiss, and the ship's hatch opened to reveal a contingent of armed guards. Their black exosuits gleamed under the harsh artificial light, and their weapons were trained on him as he descended the ramp. "Overseer Klex Thursday," one of them barked, his voice cold and unyielding. "You are to be escorted directly to the High Council chamber. Move." He didn't argue. He couldn't afford to. The guards flanked him as they marched through the gleaming corridors of the central spire, their footsteps echoing against the polished floors. Klex Thursday's gaze darted around, taking in the opulence of the collective's heart. It all felt so fragile now, so insignificant in the face of what he had witnessed. The massive doors to the High Council chamber slid open with a low rumble, revealing a circular room bathed in golden light. The counselors sat atop raised platforms, their forms obscured by shimmering energy fields. "Clex Thursday," one of them said, their voice amplified and distorted. "You have requested an audience under a priority Omega protocol. Explain yourself." He stepped forward, his claws clenching at his sides. "Counselors," he began, his voice wavering. "Station Prime Theta has been destroyed. The resonant experiments, they were successful, but we lost control. A human subject was—" "Stop," another counselor interrupted, their tone sharp. "You speak of the Omega experiments? The ones deemed too dangerous to pursue further." Clex Thursday hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, but we believed. You believed wrong," the first counselor snapped. "Do you have any idea what you've unleashed?" "She's more than we anticipated," Clex Thursday said quickly, his voice rising in desperation. "She's not just powerful, she's unstoppable. She destroyed the facility, the planet, and she let me go. She wanted me to come here, to warn you. She wants you to retaliate." The chamber fell silent, the weight of his words pressing down on everyone present. Finally, a third counselor spoke, their voice calm but edged with steel. "And why would she want that? What does she gain from provoking the collective?" Clex Thursday hesitated. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I believe she's testing us. She's evolving." The room erupted into a flurry of voices, the counselors debating furiously among themselves. Clex Thursday stood in the center, feeling smaller with every passing moment. They didn't understand. They couldn't. "We cannot ignore this threat," one of the counselors said, their voice cutting through the chaos. "If she is as powerful as you claim, we must mobilize our fleets immediately." Another counselor countered, their tone wary. "And risk leading her straight to us? What if she's already here?" The word sent a chill down Clex Thursday's spine. He hadn't considered that possibility. What if she had followed him? What if— The chamber lights flickered. A low hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. The golden light of the council's energy fields dimmed, their forms becoming clearer. Panic spread through the room as consoles sparked and systems began to fail. "She's here," Clex Thursday whispered, his voice barely audible over the chaos. The hum grew deafening, and the room was bathed in a blinding light. For a brief moment, everything was still, and then she appeared. She stood in the center of the council chamber, her presence casting an unnatural glow over the room. The light emanating from her seemed to devour the golden hues of the chamber, replacing them with an eerie, pulsating aura. The counselors froze, their towering platforms suddenly insignificant before her. Clex Thursday stumbled backward, his claws scrabbling against the smooth floor. His mind screamed at him to run, but his legs refused to obey. He could feel it, an oppressive energy radiating from her, heavy and suffocating, as if the air itself bent to her will. "You called yourselves the pinnacle of creation," she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "But look at you now, cowering in the face of something you can't control." One of the counselors finally spoke, their voice trembling but defiant. "You dare invade the seat of the collective's power? Do you have any idea what you're facing?" Her gaze shifted to the counselor, her glowing eyes narrowing. "I know exactly what I'm facing," she said. "The question is, do you?" Without warning, the shimmering energy field surrounding the counselors flickered and collapsed, leaving them exposed. The sudden loss of their protective barriers sent a ripple of panic through the chamber. "Activate the defense grid," another counselor barked, slamming their claws onto a console. The room's walls hummed as concealed turrets emerged, their barrels glowing with charged plasma. The girl didn't flinch. The turrets opened fire, streams of searing plasma converging on her position. The air crackled with energy, and the floor beneath her feet scorched and buckled. But when the smoke cleared, she was still standing untouched. Her expression didn't change. If anything, There was a flicker of disappointment in her eyes. "Is this it?" she asked softly. The great collective, reduced to firing toys at something they don't understand. She raised a hand, and the room trembled. The turrets twisted and groaned, as if an invisible force was crushing them. One by one, they imploded, the sound of metal rending and shattering filling the chamber. Sparks rained down, and the acrid stench of burning circuits filled the air. Klex Thursday could barely breathe. This was worse than anything he had imagined. She wasn't just powerful. She was unstoppable, a force of nature that defied comprehension. "You don't have to do this," another counselor said, their voice breaking. "We can negotiate. We can." "There's nothing to negotiate," she interrupted, her tone icy. "You took everything from me. My life, my humanity, my future. And for what? To create a weapon you couldn't control?" Her voice rose, and the energy in the room intensified. "You wanted power. You wanted something that could bend to your will, something you could use to dominate. But you didn't think about the cost. You didn't think about what happens when the weapon turns on its creators." The counselor who had spoken shrank back, their mandibles clicking nervously. "You don't understand," another one said, desperation creeping into their voice. "We did what we had to. The collective must survive. Sacrifices are necessary for the greater good." Her laughter was sharp and bitter, echoing off the chamber walls. "The greater good? Is that what you tell yourselves to sleep at night? How many lives have you destroyed in the name of your greater good? How many innocent people have you torn apart to feed your ambition?" Klex Thursday found his voice, though it was weak and trembling. "Please," he said, stepping forward. "If you kill us all, what will that make you? How are you any different from the monsters you claim we are?" She turned to him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, he thought he saw a flicker of something, doubt perhaps, or regret. But it was gone as quickly as it came. "I didn't choose this," she said quietly. "You made me into this. And now you want to blame me for what I've become." The energy around her surged, and the floor beneath her cracked and splintered. The counselors began to back away, their composure crumbling under the weight of her power. "You wanted a weapon," she said, her voice cold and resolute. "Now you'll see what happens when the weapon decides it's had enough." She raised both hands, and the chamber erupted into chaos. The walls buckled inward, and the ceiling began to collapse. Massive chunks of metal and debris rained down, and the counselor scrambled to escape. Klex Thursday fell to the ground, shielding himself as the chamber disintegrated around him. He could hear the screams of the counselors, the groan of failing structures, and the deafening roar of her unleashed power. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it was over. When Klex Thursday opened his eyes, the chamber was gone. The spire had been reduced to a smoldering ruin, its once pristine walls now twisted and blackened. The counselors were nowhere to be seen, their platforms reduced to rubble. She stood in the center of the devastation, her figure silhouetted against the flames. For a moment, she seemed almost human, her shoulders slumping as if weighed down by the destruction she had caused. But when she turned to face him, her glowing eyes were as cold and unyielding as ever. "This is only the beginning," she said softly. And then she was gone. Klex Thursday stood amidst the ruins, his legs shaking beneath him. The collective's pinnacle of power, the High Council, was obliterated in less than a cycle. The air was thick with ash and smoke, and the acrid stench of melted metal burned his nostrils. The hum of distant alarms was the only sound in the eerie silence that followed her departure. His claws trembled as he activated his communicator. "Emergency distress signal," he rasped. "Station Prime Theta destroyed. High Council annihilated. Class Omega threat confirmed. Immediate planetary evacuation required." The signal echoed in the void, its reach uncertain, but it was all he could do. The weight of his failure pressed down on him, like gravity itself. He had been a witness, a survivor of her wrath. But in her wake, survival felt more like a curse than a gift. The message sent, he stumbled through the wreckage, his mind racing. He couldn't escape the memory of her eyes, those luminous, unnatural eyes that seemed to pierce through him, searching for some hidden truth he didn't even understand himself. He had to move, to do something, anything. The collective's fleets needed to be warned, but he knew it wouldn't matter. They would rally, they would fight, and they would lose. The girl, no, the entity, was beyond anything they could comprehend. The journey to his ship was agonizingly slow. His body ached from the blast, his exoskeleton cracked in places where debris had struck him. Every step felt like a battle against the pull of despair, but he forced himself forward. The collective might be doomed, but he refused to let their legacy end in silence. When he finally reached his craft, the ship's AI greeted him with its monotone voice. Critical condition detected, advising immediate medical attention. Override, he growled. Set course for Fleet Command Central. Maximum speed. The AI hesitated. Warning. Fleet Command Central is currently on high alert. Unauthorized approach may result in termination. I don't care, Klex Thursday snapped. Do it. The ship's engines roared to life, propelling him away from the scorched remains of the collective's capital. As the planet shrank in the distance, Klex Thursday felt a pang of loss, not for the Council or the Spires, but for the idea of the collective itself. It had been flawed, yes, but it had also been powerful, resilient, and unified, and now it was falling apart. The journey through hyperspace gave him too much time to think. Her words echoed in his mind, each one cutting deeper than the last. You made me into this. It was true. The experiments had been sanctioned by the collective, their methods brutal and invasive. But Klex Thursday had always believed the ends justified the means. The Resonant Initiative had promised salvation, a weapon to ensure their dominance in an increasingly hostile galaxy. Instead, they had created their executioner. When the ship exited hyperspace, Fleet Command Central loomed ahead. The sprawling station bristled with weaponry, its defenses a testament to the collective's might. Hundreds of ships patrolled the perimeter, their formations tight and disciplined. As Klex Thursday approached, the comm system crackled to life. Unidentified vessel. State your designation and purpose or be destroyed. This is Overseer Klex Thursday. Priority Omega clearance, he said quickly. I have urgent information for Fleet Command. A Class Omega threat has. Before he could finish, a blast of energy rocked his ship. The shields flared, barely holding against the impact. Stand down! Klex Thursday barked into the comm. I'm here to warn you, not attack. But the response came in the form of another barrage, this one disabling his engines. The ship lurched, its systems flickering as it was forcibly drawn into a docking bay by a tractor beam. When the hatch opened, a squad of heavily armed soldiers greeted him. Their weapons were trained on him, their expressions hidden behind the visors of their helmets. Overseer Klex Thursday, their leader said, his voice cold and precise. You are under arrest for unauthorized experimentation and treason against the collective. Treason? Klex Thursday spat, his mandibles clicking in anger. You fools have no idea what's coming. She's already destroyed the Council. Do you think your petty accusations mean anything now? The soldiers didn't flinch. You'll explain yourself to Fleet Command. Move. They escorted him through the labyrinthine corridors of the station, their weapons never wavering. Klex Thursday's frustration boiled over, but he held his tongue. He needed them to listen, and anger wouldn't help. When they reached the command center, he was thrust into a circular room filled with holographic displays and high-ranking officers. The fleet admiral stood at the center, his imposing figure framed by the glow of a tactical map. Overseer Klex Thursday, the admiral said, his voice heavy with disdain. You have a lot to answer for. Klex Thursday didn't bow, didn't kneel. There was no time for ceremony. The Resonant Initiative has failed, he said bluntly. The human test subject escaped. She's more powerful than anything we've ever encountered. She destroyed the High Council and the Capital. She's coming for all of us. The room fell silent, the officers exchanging uneasy glances. "Do you expect us to believe this?" the Admiral asked, his tone skeptical. "Believe it or don't," Klex Thursday snapped. "But if you don't act, she'll tear this station apart just like she did the Council. She's not just a threat, she's extinction." The Admiral studied him for a long moment before nodding to one of his officers. "Prepare the fleet," he ordered. "Activate all defense protocols. If this entity is as dangerous as he claims, we'll need every resource at our disposal." Klex Thursday felt a glimmer of hope, but it was short-lived. The room suddenly shook, a deep rumble reverberating through the station. The holographic displays flickered and the lights dimmed. "She's here," Klex Thursday whispered. The Admiral turned to him, his expression grim. "Then let's see what the collective's might can do." The rumble continued to shake the station, growing in intensity as if something vast and unstoppable was bearing down on them. The fleet command officers scrambled, activating emergency protocols and initiating defensive measures. Klex Thursday's heart hammered in his chest. He had seen the destruction she was capable of. There was no strategy, no weapon they could deploy that would stop her. He was beginning to realize that all the firepower in the galaxy was nothing against an enemy who didn't need to fight at all. She was a force, not a weapon. "She's coming," he muttered, louder this time. "Get the fleet ready for impact." The Admiral didn't hesitate. He barked orders to his officers, who scrambled to comply. But even as they moved with precision, Klex Thursday could see the doubt creeping into their eyes. This wasn't a battle. They were preparing for their extinction. "Overseer Klex Thursday," the Admiral said, his voice suddenly soft. "Is there any way to stop her?" Klex Thursday met his gaze. "There's only one way." The Admiral raised an eyebrow. "And that is—" Klex Thursday hesitated. The truth was, he wasn't sure. They had created her. Yes, they had pushed her to this point of unimaginable power. But the key to stopping her, if there was one, remained elusive. She was too alien. Even the collective's finest minds hadn't been able to predict the depth of her abilities. "I don't know," Klex Thursday admitted, his voice hollow. "But there might be a chance if we can get close enough to her." The Admiral's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Klex Thursday took a deep breath, trying to focus. "We've underestimated her. Her power isn't just raw strength. It's psychological. She's built on fear, rage, revenge. If we can somehow neutralize the emotional component, we might stand a chance." The Admiral stared at him, unsure whether to believe him. "And how do you propose we do that?" "Contact the human survivors, the ones who were involved in the project," Klex Thursday said. "They might know something about her weaknesses. They might be able to reach her." For a long moment, the room was silent. The idea seemed as desperate as it was untested, but the Admiral finally nodded. "Make it happen. Prepare all ships for evasive maneuvers. If we're going to try this, we'll need to keep her distracted long enough for the fleet to mobilize." Klex Thursday turned on his heel and rushed out of the command center, making his way to the communications bay. As he moved, he could feel the tremors intensifying, a sickening reminder of what was to come. By the time he reached the communications hub, his mind was racing. Could they really reach her? Could anyone hope to reason with the creature that had once been human? The technician in charge of the station's comm systems looked up from her terminal. "Overseer Klex Thursday, you're in a rush. We need to contact the survivors of the Resonant Initiative," Klex Thursday said urgently. "Set up a direct link to the human colonies. Now." The technician's brow furrowed. "Sir, those colonies have been on lockdown for years. I don't know if we can even make contact." "Do it," Klex Thursday snapped. "I'll handle the rest." She didn't argue. The technician worked quickly, her fingers flying over the controls. A few moments later, a direct line to one of the human colonies was established. Klex Thursday stared at the screen, watching as the image of a human operator appeared. The person's face was thin, drawn, and their eyes haunted. "What is it?" the human asked, their voice sharp and weary. "I need to speak to someone from the Resonant Initiative," Klex Thursday said, his voice tight. "It's urgent. We're facing the product of your research." The human's eyes widened, their lips trembling. "You're not serious," they muttered. "You're telling me she's alive?" "Yes," Klex Thursday replied. "More than alive. She's here, and she's coming for us." The operator looked around nervously, as if checking to see if anyone else was listening. After a long pause, they spoke again, their voice quiet. "We've all been expecting this for years, but no one's ever been able to reach her." Klex Thursday leaned in, his eyes burning with desperation. "Is there anything you can tell me? Anything that could give us a chance to stop her?" The human hesitated. "There's one thing," they said slowly, glancing over their shoulder again. "But I don't know if it'll work. The protocol was supposed to be a last resort. It might disrupt the connection she has with her powers." "Tell me," Klex Thursday demanded. The operator spoke quickly, each word strained. "There's a psychic link between her and the facility that created her. It was designed to control her, to monitor her emotions. If we can sever that link, it might weaken her. But you'll need to find the facility before she gets to it." Klex Thursday felt a glimmer of hope, but it was fragile. "Where is it?" "On a moon in the Elysian system," the operator said. "I can give you the coordinates." "But Klex Thursday..." "What? You're not going to like what you find there." "I don't care," Klex Thursday replied. "Give me the coordinates." Without another word, the operator sent the information across, and the connection was cut. Klex Thursday stared at the screen for a long moment. The coordinates were clear. The moon in question was far from the fleet's current position, but if they didn't act fast, there would be no stopping her. He turned and rushed to the station's hangar. The battle for survival was just beginning, but Klex Thursday had one thing in his favor. The human girl might be unstoppable, but so was he, and he had nothing left to lose. Klex Thursday barely had time to gather himself before the station's alarms blared once again, signaling an incoming threat. The eerie silence of the communications bay had given him a brief moment of respite, but now the harsh reality was setting in. She was close. He could feel it in the tremor of the station's walls, the unnatural stillness in the air. His every instinct screamed at him to run, to escape, but there was nowhere to go. She had come for them all. His mind raced as he moved through the station, heading toward the hangar. The massive bay was bustling with activity, officers and technicians working furiously to ready the fleet. Ships of all sizes and classes were being readied for launch, their engines humming with power. It didn't matter. Nothing they did could stop her. He had seen firsthand the destruction she was capable of, and now he had one last hope, a slim chance, a desperate gamble. If he could find the facility and sever the psychic link, maybe, just maybe, he could save what little remained of the collective. But he wasn't certain, and that uncertainty gnawed at him. As he approached his own ship, the pilot standing by gave him a terse nod. "All systems are online, Overseer." "Good," Klex Thursday replied, striding past him toward the ramp. "Prepare for immediate departure. We're heading to the Elysian system." Without further words, the pilot climbed into the cockpit and Klex Thursday followed. The ship's engines roared to life, and they lifted off, breaking free from the station's grip and into the cold expanse of space. The journey was swift, but the weight of impending doom hung over them like a dark cloud. As they broke through the atmosphere and into open space, Klex Thursday's eyes remained locked on the navigation system, his mind preoccupied with the coordinates. Time was running out. The stars outside flickered past them as they entered the Elysian system. It was a desolate place, barely a few planets and moons that had been largely forgotten by the collective. But one of those moons had become the center of their nightmare, the site of their hubris. Klex Thursday couldn't help but think of the girl, the human who had been transformed into something far beyond their comprehension. She was a weapon, yes, but she was also something else, something more, a product of their arrogance, their belief that they could control her, use her, and now she was coming for them. Approaching target, the pilot's voice broke through his thoughts. The moon loomed large on the screen, its barren surface barely visible against the black void of space. The facility was hidden beneath the surface, deep within the moon's crust. It was a place of secrets, a place where they had created her, forged her into the living weapon that was now their undoing. "Drop out of hyperspace," Klex Thursday ordered. "Prepare for landing. We're going in." The ship's engines roared as they transitioned to real space, and Klex Thursday felt a sickening lurch in his stomach as they descended toward the moon's surface. Once they touched down on the rocky, desolate ground, Klex Thursday wasted no time. He grabbed his weapon and rushed out of the ship, his claws digging into the moon's dust as he sprinted toward the entrance of the facility. The area was eerily quiet. The only sounds were the echoes of their footsteps and the occasional hiss of air escaping from the cracks in the moon's surface. The facility's entrance was a dark, foreboding structure, a massive door that seemed to swallow the light. He approached it, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it, the heart of the nightmare. As he activated the door's control panel, a voice echoed through the air, its tone cold and mechanical. "Access granted. Welcome, Overseer Klex Thursday." The door slid open with a hiss, revealing the dark interior of the facility. Klex Thursday stepped inside, his every sense on high alert. The facility was vast, its corridors twisting and turning like a labyrinth. It was silent, save for the occasional hum of distant machinery. "This is where it all began," Klex Thursday whispered, more to himself than anyone else. He didn't know what he was looking for. He just knew he had to find it, whatever it was. The psychic link, the key to severing it. The girl had been tied to this place, to these machines. If he could reach the heart of it, maybe he could undo what had been done. But with every step he took, the weight of his failure pressed down on him. He had been part of this. He had been complicit in turning her into what she had become. And now, it was too late to change that. Klex Thursday reached a large chamber deep within the facility. At the center of the room stood a massive console, its lights flickering as if struggling to stay powered. And in front of it, an open chamber. The chamber was where they had kept her, where they had forced her to undergo the transformations that had turned her into the weapon they now feared. He walked toward the console, his claws trembling as he began to input the codes he had memorized. The screens flickered to life, displaying images of the girl, her face twisted in pain, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light. She was connected to the machines, her mind ensnared by their influence. This was where they had broken her. This was where it had all gone wrong. As Klex Thursday worked frantically, trying to decipher the data on the screen, he heard a sound behind him, a soft scrape of claws against metal. He turned just in time to see her, the girl. But she wasn't the fragile, innocent creature she had once been. Her body had been transformed, her eyes glowing with an eerie, otherworldly light. She stood at the entrance of the chamber, her presence filling the space like an overwhelming force. Klex Thursday's heart stopped. She was here, and this time she wasn't afraid. "You came," she said, her voice cold and unrecognizable. Klex Thursday stood frozen, his mind racing. There was no escape now. She was the end of them all. But he had one chance left. "If I sever the link, you'll be free," he said, his voice shaky. "I can end this. I can stop it." Her eyes narrowed. "You think you can save me?" Klex Thursday's throat tightened. I'm trying to save us all." Her gaze softened for a moment, and for a brief second, Klex Thursday thought he saw something familiar in her eyes, something human. But then, the moment passed, and the power surged within her once again. "No," she said. "You've already failed." And with that, she lunged forward, her movements a blur, faster than anything Klex Thursday had ever encountered. The room erupted into chaos as Klex Thursday scrambled to defend himself, the power of the girl overwhelming him. The psychic link had already been severed, but she had become something far beyond anything the collective could have imagined. There was no stopping her now. Clex Thursday's heart pounded in his chest as the girl's form blurred before him, a wave of raw, unbridled power crashing down on him. Her eyes, once a reflection of humanity, now burned with an otherworldly fire. She had transcended the very thing they had created her to be, an instrument of destruction, and now she was a force, unstoppable and untouchable. The chamber trembled under the weight of her presence as she closed the distance between them, her claws extending like weapons made of the very darkness that surrounded them. Clex Thursday had faced many threats in his life, but nothing compared to the girl standing before him. She was a living storm, a hurricane of energy that seemed to warp reality itself. He barely managed to sidestep as she swung a clawed hand toward him, her speed too much for him to track. The force of her blow shattered the wall behind him, sending debris flying through the air. Clex Thursday's mind raced. She had become something beyond control. The psychic link may have been severed, but the girl was still driven by something far more primal: anger, pain, and the desire for revenge. She was not just a weapon. She was a being of pure emotion, untethered by reason or fear. "Why?" Clex Thursday gasped, struggling to regain his footing. "Why are you doing this?" She tilted her head slightly, her glowing eyes narrowing. "Why? You did this to me," she replied, her voice cold and distant. "You turned me into this. You thought you could control me." The words hit him like a physical blow. He had never imagined that she would remember, let alone understand what they had done to her. But it was clear now. Everything she had endured, every moment of pain, had been imprinted on her very soul. Clex Thursday tried to think quickly, but he could feel his strength waning. The girl's power was unlike anything he had ever experienced. She wasn't just physically strong. She was an unstoppable force of will. Her mind and body had fused into something greater than the sum of their parts, something that would break him if he didn't act fast. He glanced toward the console in the center of the room. It was still active, still displaying data on the girl, on the project, on her transformation. Clex Thursday's hand hovered over the controls. But before he could make a move, the girl was upon him again, her claws slashing through the air with deadly precision. This time, he was ready. He reached for his own weapon, a modified energy blade that had been designed to counter psychic forces. The blade hummed to life as he swung it toward her, the plasma edge glowing brightly as it met her strike. There was a resounding clash of energy, the air crackling with the force of the collision. But the girl didn't recoil. Instead, she pressed forward, her strength pushing Clex Thursday back step by step. She was relentless, a machine built for destruction. "I'm sorry," Clex Thursday murmured, his voice filled with regret. The girl's eyes flashed with something he couldn't place. "Sorry," she repeated, her voice taking on a mocking tone. "You should have been sorry a long time ago." Her claws swiped again, and Clex Thursday barely managed to block the strike, the impact sending shock waves through his body. He staggered back, the weight of his exhaustion beginning to take its toll. "You don't understand," he said, his breath ragged. "You never did. You were never meant to be this." Her expression shifted slightly, as if something had broken through her fury, something buried deep within her. "I was never meant to be anything," she whispered, almost to herself. In that moment, Clex Thursday saw it. The humanity, the girl that had once been innocent and vulnerable. But it was fleeting, a ghost in the storm. She lunged once more, and this time, Clex Thursday was ready. With a swift motion, he activated the facility's self-destruct sequence, the countdown beginning to echo through the chamber. "You'll never win," he said, his voice grim. "This place ends with you." The girl's eyes widened, and for a brief moment, she hesitated. It was the briefest of moments, long enough for Clex Thursday to make his move. He grabbed her by the arm and pulled her toward the console, activating a failsafe that would, hopefully, sever the energy connection between her and the facility's systems. For a second, there was nothing. No sound, no movement. The girl's body went limp in his arms, her form flickering, as if something within her had been disconnected. And then the explosion came. Klex Thursday barely managed to shield himself as the shockwave rocked the facility, sending pieces of debris flying in every direction. The world seemed to shift, the ground trembling beneath him. The air was filled with smoke and fire, the smell of burning metal thick in his nostrils. When the dust settled, Klex Thursday stood alone in the ruins of the facility, the girl nowhere to be found. Had he saved her? Had he stopped her? Or had he just condemned them all? The questions hung in the air like a pall, unanswered. Klex Thursday's body trembled with the aftermath of the blast, his mind reeling from the pain and exhaustion. But there was something else, something deeper. He wasn't sure if it was relief or something worse, guilt maybe. He had tried. That was all he could say. But it felt like the end of everything. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning. The silence that followed the explosion was deafening. Klex Thursday's body was battered, his mind struggling to comprehend what had just occurred. The once dominant facility lay in ruins around him, its systems failing, its heart torn out by the blast. He could still feel the sting of the girl's presence lingering in the air, like a shadow that refused to be erased. The girl. He tried to remember her face. The face of the human girl they had twisted into something unrecognizable. She had once been fragile, full of emotion, full of life. And now she was something else entirely. He should have never believed that he could fix what had been done. But the question still lingered in his mind. Had she truly been lost? Or was there still a part of her left inside, buried beneath the anger and destruction she had become? Klex Thursday stumbled out of the wreckage, his limbs shaking from the exertion. The self-destruct sequence had worked. At least, that much was clear. The facility was gone, reduced to rubble. But the aftermath was far from over. He stepped into the open air of the moon's surface, the desolate landscape stretching out before him. The cold wind swept through the remains of the once bustling base, carrying with it the scent of burnt metal and ozone. There was nothing left here. No answers, no redemption. Just a dead world. Klex Thursday turned back toward the remains of his ship. His pilot, a loyal officer who had stood by him through countless battles, had vanished in the explosion. He could only hope that the damage hadn't been too severe, that the escape route he'd planned was still viable. With trembling hands, he activated the ship's systems, the hum of the engines responding weakly. The lights flickered, but it seemed to be functioning, at least for now. He wasted no time boarding the ship, the memories of the girl still haunting his every step. The stars outside flickered past as the ship ascended into space. Klex Thursday's mind was a blur of confusion and regret. He had seen countless empires rise and fall, but nothing had prepared him for this. The girl had been their creation, their weapon, and yet in the end, it had been they who had become the prey. As he left the shattered moon behind, he couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. The girl, or what she had become, was still out there, somewhere. And no matter how far he ran, no matter how much he tried to forget, he knew she would be waiting. Klex Thursday couldn't undo the damage. He had failed her. He had failed them all. But as the ship drifted farther into the unknown reaches of space, one thought began to form in the depths of his mind. A thought that offered him a small measure of solace. Perhaps, just perhaps, the girl hadn't been entirely lost. Perhaps there was still a chance for redemption. For all of them, the future remained uncertain. But one thing was clear. The collective was no longer the masters of their fate. They were the survivors of a great and terrible reckoning. And as Klex Thursday gazed out at the stars, he wondered if the girl, if her humanity, could somehow be salvaged from the wreckage of their shared history, or if the galaxy would forever remember her as the monster they had created. With a heavy heart, Klex Thursday set the ship's course toward the farthest reaches of space. He would never stop looking for her. He couldn't. If you found this story gripping, don't forget to subscribe for more sci-fi thrillers. Hit that like button and leave a comment below sharing your thoughts on what might happen next in this broken universe. Your feedback helps fuel the next chapter of the journey. Until then, stay curious and keep exploring the unknown.